Now, it is 27 minutes past 9 and today marks exactly a year since Sarah Everard was kidnapped and murdered by a serving police officer. This morning, her family paid tribute to her. They said, it's a year since Sarah died and we remember her today as every day with all our love. Sadly, Sarah is not the only woman to have lost her life recently in violent circumstances, and we would like to extend our deepest sympathy to other families who are also grieving. Well, as you will, of course, remember, the case sparked widespread debate about the role of the police and women's safety generally in the UK. Well, this morning I'm joined by activist Patsy Stevenson. Well, you remember, I'm sure you remember vividly, that photograph of Sarah when she was, when at Sarah's vigil after Patsy was arrested. And former Chief Constable Sue Fish, who says there is still a toxic sexism in the force. Patsy, thank you for joining me, and Sue. I'm finding this extraordinary that it's a year. A whole year has passed. Has anything changed?
I mean, in regards to women's safety, nothing's changed at all. And that's the thing, is that it sparked such interest around the world. It was worldwide.
It was.
And still nothing's happened. So it's like, what has to happen for there to spark actual change?
Do you feel, though, that this was some sort of watershed moment? I mean, those images of you being arrested went all over the world. There was a huge outcry. Everybody said, oh, something must, you know, that usual something must be done. Do you feel, though, that we're in any way closer to women feeling safe on the streets? I mean, now that the issue has been highlighted, or not?
I just don't think we are. I think we can look back in history and there are so many points where we're like, oh, you know, yeah, women's safety matters and women's rights matters, and still nothing changes unless it's usually activists on the front line who are pushing and pushing and pushing for legislation to be put in place or not put in place. For example, the policing bill that is like restricting us. So, you know, I just don't know what else can be done. Like, what more needs to happen before people are like, do you know what, actually, can we genuinely make a change and stop saying we're going to do something?
Yeah, it's just words are hollow, aren't they?
Yeah,
Anybody can say that. That day that you went to the vigil to show your support as to what has happened to Sarah, you'd no idea this was going to happen. I mean, nobody did. You know, the heavy-handedness. I mean, that was, you know, that was people just protesting in a very, very dignified fashion, and it turned into this horrendous, you know, overreaction, really.
Yeah, it's strange.
Must be very distressing, actually, for you to see that.
It is really strange. I think it's strange because I just didn't expect anything like that to happen. I've never been in trouble with the police or anything like that before, and I'd not even really been to a protest before. I'd been to like a Black Lives Matter protest ages ago, but nothing like, you know, and it was a vigil. Like, I didn't expect anything to happen. It was just meant to be very quiet and very solemn and just paying our respects. There were babies there, there were dogs there. Like, it wasn't, do you know what I mean? And then it just turned, and the atmosphere turned. And then it, you know, and then all I remember is looking up and just seeing cameras everywhere and just horrible.
It's horrible. It's absolutely awful. It's worth pointing out that while this was all going on at that around about that time, Number 10 were having Prosecco-fuelled gatherings, which just makes you feel even more angry about the whole thing, doesn't it?
Of course.
I can tell, I can see. It's distressing you now. I can see that. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible experience. Horrible experience that you had. Let's talk to Sue, because Sue, this was awful, absolutely horrendous. The crime against Sarah, it's very difficult to put into words how we all feel about that. But you were saying you weren't that surprised that it happened.
No, I think, sadly, this isn't, it's not a rare enough occurrence. And I think the narrative has been of one bad apple. What we do know from the femicide census is since 2009, when it started, 16 women have lost their lives at the hands of either serving or former police officers. And so this isn't rare. And the level of toxicity of a very masculine, aggressive, sexualized culture in many parts of policing enables individuals to feel that they can act with complete impunity. And indeed, sadly, in the way that we most dreadfully saw Sarah lose her life last year.
Oh, it's absolutely horrendous. What can we do, though? I mean, Patsy's saying that nothing's changed since then. Nothing has changed since Sarah was murdered.
I think very little. Sorry.
But what do we do? This is the thing. I mean, so you know the institution inside out. What can we do?
Well, I think, firstly, policing has to really accept and acknowledge and understand the scale of the problem. And one or two people leading policing might, but most people don't. And that's the issue for me, is you can't start to fix a problem unless you actually really understand it, really acknowledge and respect the fact that there is such a significant problem. And that simply is not happening. And again, in the government, there are things that they could do, but it's hollow words. I mean, Patsy's already talked about that. There was an opportunity last week through the policing bill to make misogyny a hate crime. That's what we did in Nottinghamshire back in 2016. Lots of other police forces have done that, some very recently, as starting to build. It's just one element, but it's starting to build that package of measures that can actually mean women are both safe on the street, but also trust and have confidence in their police force that should be there to protect them.
Absolutely. It's got to come from the top. Change has got to come from the top. And until very recently, it's very disappointing that there was a woman in charge of the Met. And you would have expected there to have been some sort of change. You would have looked to that for a change of culture, and that didn't happen.
Well, I think it's well documented that just because there's a female leader, it doesn't mean to say that they will take on women's issues. And in fact, in policing, it is particularly hard to do that. When I brought in the first menopause policy in Nottinghamshire, when we introduced misogyny hate crime as the first force to do so, when we started looking at sexual misconduct by police officers as corruption before it was acknowledged it was nationally, I was treated with a degree of contempt by many colleagues, including some female colleagues, at a very senior level. I was a deputy chief constable or temporary chief constable at that time, and it was seen as being, why on earth would you do that? Focus on real crime. Well, for me, if police officers cannot be trusted, if they're out exploiting relationships with vulnerable women, if they are not treating each other properly, if they're not treating their colleagues, how on earth can they treat the public properly? And again, if we're not looking after our whole workforce, because, for example, menopause doesn't just affect women, it affects men as well. It affects everyone.
Absolutely.
So, these are things that I think, as a good leader, you need to be doing and driving those. Now, I would be doing all sorts of things differently because I started somewhere, and everyone has to start somewhere. But I think now it's about how we really test police officers' views on everything around racism, around homophobia, around equality more broadly, as well as misogyny and sexism. Because if police officers don't actually accept those basic fundamentals, then they shouldn't be in the police service.
Well, Sue, we need more people like you, clearly. Thank you for joining us this morning. And Patsy, I know you're going to continue the fight, despite the fact you've had all sorts of death threats. You've had some appalling sexism. It's been absolutely dreadful and very distressing, but it's not going to stop you, is it?
No.
No, you're going to keep fighting.
Definitely.
You really are. Thank you for joining us this morning. I can tell it's still incredibly upsetting for you, and we've got a long way to go.
We do.
We've got a long way to go, but we will get there. I am convinced. Thank you very, very much indeed. Don't forget, you can watch full episodes of Lorraine on the ITV Hub and all the best clips, compilations and playlists right here on our channel. Just subscribe now and you'll never miss an upload. Click here to watch another video similar to this one, or click here to head to our channel's homepage to explore all of our exciting videos.